Hello, namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. The Trump cabinet is growing and so are the complaints. He's picked an alleged sex trafficker to lead the Justice Department. Some are calling it the worst cabinet nominee in American history. But is there a method to Trump's madness? Also, he's joking about a third presidential term in 2029. We'll tell you if that's even legally possible. Meanwhile, the outgoing President Biden is gearing up for a meeting with China's Xi Jinping. We'll decode what's on the agenda. In Ukraine, there is talk of making a nuclear bomb if Trump stops military aid. In Sri Lanka, today was election day. And in France, there is trouble brewing for right-wing leader Marine Le Pen. She could be disqualified from the 2027 presidential race. We'll tell you why. In Delhi, smog is in the air and the blame games have begun. But why doesn't anyone have a concrete plan? All this and more lined up. The headlines first.
UN nuclear watchdog chief Rafael Grossi, on a visit to Iran, meets the country's top diplomat to hold crunch nuclear talks. Tomorrow, he will visit Iran's uranium enrichment sites. This comes just months before Donald Trump returns to the White House. In 2018, Trump unilaterally withdrew the US from Iran's nuclear deal with world powers. The rupee slips to an all-time low against the US dollar. Foreign fund outflows and strong dollar demand from investors are weighing it down. Rising inflation has also affected the Indian currency negatively, but the Indian rupee's depreciation remains less severe than other Asian currencies. Dominica to bestow its highest national honor on Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It is to recognize Prime Minister Modi's contributions to Dominica during the COVID pandemic and his efforts to boost ties between the two countries. The award will be conferred next week. A Uganda TikToker is convicted for insulting the president. The 21-year-old content creator called for the public flogging of President Museveni. He now faces up to 7 years in prison. The TikToker is the fourth Ugandan to appear in court in the last 2 days for insulting the president. And diplomatic turmoil hits COP29. A French minister cancels her trip to the UN climate talks, claims Azerbaijan's president accused Paris of colonial crimes. Relations between Paris and Baku have been tense over France's support for Azerbaijan's arch-rival Armenia. Argentina also withdraws its delegation from COP29 without citing a reason.
Welcome. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Elon Musk! Oh! This is a made-up crime.
It's nice to win. Next time, if we go up even a fraction of what we went up.
From strange to stranger, that sums up Donald Trump's cabinet. He's named a few more people to run the US government, and it's all that the media can talk about in Europe, here in India, in Africa, basically all over the world. We generally do not cover government formation like this. We cover the campaign, we cover the results, and that's about it. Such an intense coverage on cabinet picks is rare. I mean, can you name Britain's defense secretary, or China's finance minister, or India's attorney general? Chances are you can't. But you know that Trump's Pentagon chief is a Fox News host. It shows the sort of power the US wields in world affairs. It also tells you how they dominate media narratives. There are so many reports, so many leaks, so many insider accounts, so the whole thing becomes riveting to cover. Of course, Trump's choices have added to the intrigue. Meet his pick for Attorney General, the man who will head the US Department of Justice, sort of like America's top cop, the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Agency, all of them will report to him. And his name is Matt Gaetz, a congressman from the state of Florida. Even Republicans are surprised by this choice. One lawmaker said that he was stunned and disgusted. Another said that Gates has a better shot at dining with Queen Elizabeth than being confirmed by the Senate. And yes, he is talking about the late British monarch. John Bolton called this the worst cabinet pick in history. And Bolton was Trump's national security advisor, a longtime Republican. I'm sure you're wondering what this outrage is all about. Well, listen to Gates's resume. He ousted a Republican House Speaker in 2023. He was investigated in a sex trafficking case. He was probed for sexual misconduct and drug abuse. And he once invited a Holocaust denier to the US Congress. That should give you an idea. But Trump says that Gates is a gifted attorney, someone who will reform the Justice Department. Which brings us to his other pick, Tulsi Gabbard, as Director of National Intelligence, basically America's intelligence chief. Now, Gabbard used to be a Democratic congresswoman, but she supported Trump this time. She was also America's first Hindu lawmaker, and her politics, like Trump, she wants Washington to withdraw from foreign wars. She opposes military aid to Ukraine. She also wants US withdrawal from Syria and Iraq. Interestingly, Gabbard met Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in 2017, right in the middle of the Syrian civil war. In 2019, Hillary Clinton claimed that Russia was grooming her, sort of like a deep state Kremlin candidate. Many Republicans are unhappy with this choice, with Tulsi Gabbard, but she and Gates may find it hard to get Senate confirmation. At least 50 senators need to approve their appointment. On paper, this should not be a problem because Republicans have 53 seats in the US Senate. But a number of them are privately concerned, and not just about the cabinet picks. Look at this report. It says the Trump team is planning a purge at the Pentagon. They're drawing up a list of officers to fire. Even Joint Chiefs of Staff are said to be on this list, especially those appointed by Mark Milley. Now, the Joint Chiefs are the heads of different military wings, like the Air Force, the Navy, or the Marines. And Milley used to be Trump's chairman of Joint Chiefs, sort of like a chief among chiefs. He later called Trump a fascist to the core. So Trump wants to root out his appointees, it seems, and that may include his successor, General Brown. Trump's allies have asked if he got the top job because he was black. So expect a churn at the Pentagon. I'm sure US rivals like China and Russia will be quite happy to see that. Trump himself was in Washington yesterday. He was invited to the White House by President Joe Biden. No animosity, no tension in the air. It was like two old golfing buddies chilling around. Take a look at this.
Well, Mr. President-elect and former President and Donald, congratulations. And looking forward to having a, like we said, smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need. And we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So
Good.
Welcome.
Thank you
back.
very much. And thank you very much. And politics is tough. And it's, in many cases, not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate it very much. And a transition that's so smooth, it'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Jill.
And how did the talks go? The White House says it was substantive and cordial, which is frankly a surprise, because not very long ago, Trump called Biden the worst president in US history, and Biden compared Trump to Hitler. Yet the two men had a cozy fireside chat. I guess that is politics for you. But before going to the White House, Trump met with Republican lawmakers. They have won both houses of Congress, the US Senate and the House of Representatives. So Trump will have absolute control in Washington. And what will he do with that power? Well, he did drop a hint. Listen to this.
I suspect I won't be running again, unless you do something. Unless you say, he's so good, we have to just figure it out.
A third term in office. Is that even possible? Legally, no. The US Constitution caps the presidential terms at 2. But constitutions can be amended. You need 2/3 majorities in the House and Senate, plus approval from 38 out of 50 states. Realistically speaking, it may not be possible. Only one US president has served more than 2 terms. Franklin Roosevelt in the 1930s and 40s, and he had a good excuse to do so. First, the Great Depression and then the Second World War. Donald Trump does not have those excuses, and his supporters say he was joking anyway. He also joked about his new friend Elon Musk. Listen to what he said. Elon won't go home. I can't get rid of him. Again, we can tell he was joking, but some members of Trump's team are actually concerned. Musk has visited Mar-a-Lago almost every day since Trump's victory. He's also joining his calls with world leaders. Musk is in those calls between world leaders and Donald Trump. So the Trump team says he is overstaying his welcome. One of them said that he was acting like a co-president. Well, too late now. Musk has used X to peddle his importance to Trump. It's as if his support pushed Trump over the line. So a lot of campaign insiders are unhappy. They feel that Musk is stealing credit. Frankly, this sounds less like a cabinet and more like a palace council. We can't wait to see who Trump picks next. Perhaps Captain Haddock from Tintin will head the Navy. That would send shivers down China's spine.
To me, the most beautiful word in the dictionary is tariff. If China or some other country is behaving badly, we have things called tariffs that are so severe. We don't want your cars unless you build the factory in China. We're going to tariff the hell out of them.
The world is watching the Trump transition, but none more closely than the Chinese president, Xi Jinping. He will meet US President Joe Biden this weekend. Both leaders are traveling to Peru. Biden and Xi will attend a summit with Pacific leaders. It will be their final encounter before Biden leaves office. So Xi Jinping is hoping to secure some last-minute concessions, and this could be his last chance, really. But will Biden grant him any relief on trade? More importantly, can he? With this meeting, can Xi Jinping Trump-proof the US-China relationship? Biden and his team appear non-committal for now.
I will observe that transitions are uniquely consequential moments in geopolitics. They're a time when competitors and adversaries can see possibly opportunity because you have this change in government here. And so part of what President Biden will communicate is that we need to maintain stability, clarity, predictability through this transition between the United States and China.
So the goal is to keep the relationship stable, at least until Trump takes over. That's what Biden is expected to tell Xi Jinping. And how will the Chinese president respond? What is Beijing's game plan? The fact is that while Trump's win is a setback, it's not really a surprise for China. They have been preparing for this scenario for months, if not for years. China's plan has two parts. In the short term, they've devised some immediate steps, like projecting stability. And Xi Jinping could use the summit in Peru for this. He could make a case for China, highlight the instability that Donald Trump is expected to bring, and try to build a bigger coalition against the West. Xi Jinping has been laying the foundations for this. Last month, he was at the BRICS summit in Russia, where he took on the West and tried to rally support from the global South.
The international balance of power is undergoing profound evolution, but the reform of the global governance system has long lagged behind. We must practice true multilateralism, adhere to consultation, joint construction, and sharing in the global governance.
Expect China to double down on this message. They need partners internationally to tide over their current challenges. The Chinese economy is in a state of decline. Signs of internal strife are growing. Unemployment is rising. Incomes are falling. This has led to multiple protests. So in this context, Trump's victory could actually offer China some respite. It could distract the world from China's problems. And in this time, Beijing would try to paint Trump's America as unstable and position China as a more reliable, a more stable partner. This is being discussed as their short-term pitch. What's the long-term plan? China has armed itself with new tools that can inflict economic pain on the US. They allow Beijing to blacklist foreign companies, slap sanctions, and cut American access to supply chains. In recent years, China has passed new laws for this. One of them is called Anti-Foreign Sanctions Law. Like the name suggests, this is specifically aimed at foreign sanctions. It allows Beijing to impose tit-for-tat measures. So if the US sanctions Chinese companies, Beijing can hit back with the same force. Similarly, China has expanded its export controls. All these measures pave the path for a more intense trade war. Beijing can effectively weaponize exports. The scenarios are daunting. Imagine if China cuts off American access to pharmaceuticals or critical natural resources like lithium. Despite its best efforts to pivot, the US still relies on China for several key imports. We have some data from 2022. In that year, America imported $7.3 billion worth of lithium batteries from China and almost $7 billion worth of pharmaceuticals. These two products are among the top exports from China to the US. Even Trump's campaign merchandise was made in China, and we saw this firsthand last week. In shops around Washington, D.C., from MAGA hats to T-shirts and badges, most of them had a Made in China label. Now, Donald Trump has promised to target these imports.
And we'll also pass the Trump Reciprocal Trade Act, meaning if China or any other country is charging us 100 or 200% tariff or tax, then we will charge them 100 or 200% tariff or tax in return. In other words, it's an eye for an eye.
China is preparing for that scenario. If Trump follows through on this threat, if he slaps a 60% tariff on Chinese imports, expect Beijing to retaliate, to take countermeasures. Although reports say it may not happen immediately, China won't make the first moves. Xi Jinping has apparently decided to wait and watch. He wants to see if Trump follows through on his threat first. And the entire situation honestly feels like a cowboy duel. Both sides armed with weapons, waiting to see who shoots first. Needless to say, such standoffs rarely end well. Elon Musk may be riding on the top of the Trump train, but his social media platform is not doing so well. I'm talking about X. On election day, it lost 115,000 US-based users, 115,000 users. All of them deactivated their accounts. Since then, more and more people are following this trend. And where are they going? There's a new platform called Blue Sky. It's being pitched as an alternative to X. In fact, it was created by Twitter founder Jack Dorsey. Blue Sky has added 1 million users after November 5th. But can it replace X? And will it become just another echo chamber? Our next report tells you.
In 2019, Jack Dorsey was still heading Twitter. That's when he launched the Blue Sky project. The idea was to build a decentralized standard for social media, one that Twitter would adopt. That did not happen. Elon Musk bought Twitter in 2022. It is now X. So Blue Sky became a separate platform. It's an independent public benefit corporation today, and giving some tough competition to X. In September, Blue Sky had 9 million subscribers. Now it has over 15 million. The platform has added over 1 million users since November 5th. That's election day in America. And the reason was X's hard shift to the right. Since acquiring X, Musk has championed free speech, but fewer content regulations have led to misinformation, political bias, and a rise in divisive rhetoric. His recent support for President-elect Donald Trump only intensified the platform's shift. So users sought out a fresh space for discourse. On election day, X lost 115,000 US-based users. Where did they move? Well, Blue Sky is the biggest gainer. The app is currently at number 1 in the iOS App Store in the United States, and it's because of its image. Blue Sky has projected itself as a fresh space for discourse, especially for liberals moving away from X. Even the news organization The Guardian says it'll stop posting on X. An advantage Blue Sky has is its interface. It's like an older Twitter. You can share a post of 256 characters. It can be liked, replied to, or retweeted. You can also follow individuals. That way you get their updates. Essentially, very similar to X. But will it replace the social media platform? Well, over the years, X has faced many such threats. Mastodon, Post-Pebble, Spill, they have all come and gone. There was also Threads. It's still gaining users, but it's yet to overshadow X. Blue Sky has also had its share of controversies. It has dealt with moderation issues. The app was accused of failing to protect users or moderating racist content. Frustrated users even threatened to stop posting unless the platform established some guardrails. That has changed now with new moderation updates. But while Blue Sky may feel like what Twitter used to be, a place to have conversations without the intense partisanship, it faces the risk of becoming an echo chamber itself. Social media often gravitates towards like-minded communities, creating self-affirming spaces that stifle diversity of thought. The influx of disillusioned ex-users may inadvertently lead Blue Sky to cater to one political perspective, thus alienating voices across the spectrum. In the realm of social media, change is the only constant. The question isn't whether Blue Sky will replace X, but whether it offers the diversity of views that its creators envisioned. That makes Blue Sky's challenge bigger. It'll have to grow while maintaining balance. That's a delicate act in today's polarized digital landscape.
Let's talk about the Ukraine war. It's gone on for nearly 1,000 days, and Donald Trump's victory means uncertainty for Kyiv. So they may be exploring some extreme options, like developing a Ukrainian nuclear weapon. So will it come down to that? We'll discuss. But first, let's look at the latest situation on the battlefield. Russia has lost some territory. It wants to seize this lost territory. It's amassing troops. It is bombarding the Ukrainian capital. Yesterday, it hit Kyiv with a wave of drone and missile strikes. It was the first aerial assault on the capital since August. Meanwhile, Ukraine is struggling to hold on to its gains. It had the advantage this summer, but now its front lines are faltering. So is the political support, courtesy Donald Trump. He promised to end the Ukraine war on day one. How? He says it would require concessions, especially from the Ukrainian side. Basically, Kyiv will have to give up land for peace. Of course, Zelensky does not agree, but refusing Trump will cost him American support. The US, after all, is the biggest supplier of military weapons to Ukraine. It's given $64 billion in military aid so far. If Kyiv refuses Trump's plan, that money will stop flowing. Which is why Ukraine is exploring a second option, making its own nuclear weapon. It was first mentioned in this report. It cites a briefing paper prepared by Ukraine's defense ministry. The paper looks at options. What can Kyiv do if Trump pulls aid? And one of the options is to build a rudimentary nuclear bomb, something that should be ready in a matter of months. Ukraine could use plutonium for this, and the technology won't be new either. It will be similar to America's atomic bomb. In fact, here's a quote from that paper. Creating a simple atomic bomb, as the United States did within the framework of the Manhattan Project, would not be a difficult task 80 years later. So the report states a simple atomic bomb, big enough to take out a Russian military base or even some industrial targets. Now, Ukraine has denied all these reports. It says it has no such plans either to develop or acquire nukes. That should have put the speculation to rest. But you see, this is not the first time that Ukraine has dabbled with the idea of getting nukes. This country became independent in 1991, Ukraine, when the Soviet Union disintegrated. Ukraine inherited thousands of Soviet nuclear weapons. In 1994, Ukraine gave them up. It transferred all those nukes to Russia. This was in exchange of security, and it was a deal brokered by the West. Ukraine's security guarantees are since gone, but it still has 9 operational reactors. It also has the expertise to build weapons. So it should not really be difficult. And it is something that President Zelensky has mentioned before.
What is the way out? Either Ukraine will have nuclear weapons, and then this is defense for us, or we should have some kind of an alliance. Today, we do not know any effective alliances other than NATO.
Either Ukraine joins the alliance or it may have no choice but to pursue nukes. That was Zelensky's ultimatum, and it shows Ukraine's desperation, especially for security guarantees. But you see, Kyiv is not the only one that's desperate. The current US administration is desperate too. Joe Biden has 2 months left in office, and he's racing to secure aid for Ukraine. Biden was in Berlin in October. It was his last trip to Europe, and he discussed the Ukraine war with allies. Now, his top diplomat is in the region, that's Antony Blinken, and he's trying to make sure that Ukraine gets what it needs.
As we're working to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs to effectively defend itself, the United States continues to step up. We've obligated just recently and pushed out the door another $8 billion in security assistance for Ukraine. That was in September. Another almost $500 million just a few weeks ago. And President Biden is committed to making sure that every dollar we have at our disposal will be pushed out the door between now and January 20th.
So Biden is pushing more aid to Ukraine. The idea is to create a buffer as Trump pledges to end the war. He hasn't mentioned any plan, though, which leaves Ukraine at a crossroads. What happens if all diplomatic solutions fail? What will Ukraine do then? Getting nukes could reshape global security for generations. It could trigger another arms race, so the stakes are quite high. The question is, how far will Ukraine go to protect its sovereignty? Let's turn to Sri Lanka now, where today was election day, the first parliamentary election since the financial crisis. It's a big test for the country's new president, Anura Kumara Dissanayake. He called for these polls after winning the presidency. Right now, his party has just 3 seats in parliament, which is not enough to make meaningful policies. So Dissanayake is asking Sri Lankans for a decisive mandate. He says we should win big enough to make the opposition cry, which is a strange rallying call. But what exactly is a big win? Sri Lanka's parliament has 225 seats. The majority mark is 113. Dissanayake is eyeing a 2/3 majority, one that will enable him to reform the presidency or maybe even abolish it. But does his party stand a chance? And what about the old faces like Wickremesinghe and the Rajapaksas? Will they be making a comeback? Our next report tells you.
Sri Lankans lined up to vote today. A bit of a déjà vu if you follow their politics. Because Sri Lanka voted in September to elect a new president. But this one is for the parliament. Around 17 million people were eligible to vote. They lined up at more than 13,000 polling stations across the country. The turnout was reportedly low, perhaps a sign of fatigue from back-to-back elections. But those who did turn up had the same message.
There is no corruption, and the people who are supposed to do their work do the work they are supposed to do.
We need to select the people who can serve the country without any corruptions.
This is Sri Lanka's first parliament elections after the financial crisis of 2022. A crisis triggered by mismanagement and corruption. So voters are desperate for change. We saw that in September too, when they voted in a Marxist leader as president, Anura Kumara Dissanayake or AKD. He leads the NPP or the National People's Power Alliance. They have just 3 seats in the current parliament. Not enough to fill a cabinet, let alone implement major reforms. Which is why AKD called for these snap elections. He cast his vote in Colombo today.
This is an election that shows a decisive turning point. In this election, the National People's Power expects a mandate for a strong government, and we believe that the people will give us this mandate.
But what does that strong mandate look like? Most pollsters expect NPP to cross the majority mark. In Sri Lanka, that's 113. The parliament has a total of 225 seats. Out of these, 196 are directly elected by the people, and the rest distributed based on vote share. A simple majority will allow AKD to implement reforms. But his goal is much bigger. AKD wants to abolish Sri Lanka's executive presidency. Sri Lanka had a parliamentary government until 1978, much like India or the United Kingdom. Most powers rested with a prime minister. But a new constitution in 1978 created an executive presidency. The president was vested with vast powers. And many Sri Lankans trace their problems to this move. Nearly every party and president has promised to abolish this system. But once in office, they have all seemingly forgotten about it. AKD too has promised to abolish the executive presidency. But to do that, he needs a two-thirds majority. Will he get it though? Most of the old guard isn't contesting this time. AKD's predecessor, Ranil Wickremesinghe, is not in the fray. He's skipping elections for the first time since 1977. The Rajapaksa brothers, Mahinda and Gotabaya, are also missing. AKD's biggest challenge will come from the Samagi Jana Balavega, the party of his presidential rival, Sajith Premadasa.
I think the President's Party, the NPP, will emerge victorious from the parliamentary election. The size of their majority obviously is to be determined based on many other factors, including things like voter fatigue and other things as well.
Sri Lanka's biggest priority is their IMF bailout package, which is a $2.9 billion deal. AKD had promised to renegotiate that deal to reduce austerity measures. But after coming to power, he made a U-turn. He will stick to the same IMF deal, but he wants to give relief to the people, like tax cuts to the middle class. When results come in on Friday, it will be a verdict on AKD and on the economic path he has chosen. Will Sri Lankans stick to their choice from September, or will they spring a surprise?
Our next story is from France. A trial is underway in the country and it involves one of their biggest politicians, Marine Le Pen. Le Pen harbors presidential ambitions. She has contested 3 times already, in 2012, in 2017, and then again in 2022. And she lost each time. But she came second in her last 2 presidential runs. In both instances, she lost to Emmanuel Macron, the current president of France. Le Pen has not lost hope, though. She is 56 years old and she plans to run again in 2027. Chances are she could also win. She's part of the so-called far right. They have been making gains all over Europe, so Marine Le Pen could very well become the next president of France if she's allowed to contest. Which brings us back to the trial. Le Pen is facing corruption charges. She's accused of misappropriating funds from the European Union. The trial has been on for over a month and it's about to wrap up soon. On November 27th. Yesterday, French prosecutors made recommendations to the court about Le Pen's punishment if she's found guilty. And here's what they requested. The prosecutors requested a €300,000 fine, 5 years in prison, and a 5-year ban from public office. And so far, all of this is normal because prosecutors do recommend sentences. A court then decides whether to take them, and then it hands out a verdict. After that, a defendant can appeal the judgment. That's how the legal system works. But here's the catch. The French prosecutors did not stop there. They insisted on what they call a provisional execution of her political ban, meaning they want it to be implemented immediately if she's found guilty. They do not want to wait for her to appeal. Basically, the French prosecutors want to disqualify Marine Le Pen from the 2027 presidential election. Of course, Le Pen was not amused.
The chronicle of claimed ineligibility comes as no surprise. I've formed my own opinion after a few days. It has to be said, of hearings in which I took part, as you've seen almost every day. So I note that the public prosecutor's office is extremely outrageous in its claims. In particular, the claim that provisional enforcement should be applied to all those being prosecuted, including assistants, some of whom have never held any political responsibility.
Le Pen says it is outrageous, a way to stop her from contesting the 2027 election, despite the fact that she could win. She was the runner-up in the last two presidential elections and her party has been gaining support. Marine Le Pen is a leader of a party called the National Rally. She won the most votes. This party won the most votes, in fact, in this year's French parliamentary election. They did not win the maximum number of seats, but they won the popular vote. So Le Pen seems to be close to the finish line. But now she could get banned. The corruption case against her is over embezzlement. She's accused of taking money from the European Parliament. This money was supposed to be for EU aids, for administrative salaries. But Marine Le Pen is said to have used it for her political party instead. That's the charge against her. The case was first lodged in 2015, but it went to trial only this year. Marine Le Pen says that this is a scheme. She said, and I'm translating and quoting, "I think the prosecutors' wish is to deprive the French people of the ability to vote for who they want." Le Pen thinks that she will be found guilty. But she still wants to contest because she believes that she will still win. Just look at the US. Donald Trump won the election and he's a convicted felon. He claimed that the cases against him were politically motivated, so the American people decided to back him. Marine Le Pen is now saying the very same thing, basically using Trump's playbook. But will it work in France? Will Le Pen also win over the public, even if she's found guilty? We'll see in the days to come. Now let's look at Apple, the world's second most valuable company. It was number one for over a decade, but it lost the top spot earlier this year, and that makes sense. Apple seems to be lacking in innovation these days. Every year it's the same thing, a slightly fancier iPhone, a slightly upgraded camera, and a truckload of new fees. That's how Apple has held on to its dominance for so long, even though it's far past its prime. But now it has lost the number one spot, and even its bread and butter is under threat. A new lawsuit has been filed in the UK, a lawsuit worth £3 billion. Apple is accused of ripping British customers off using its iCloud monopoly. Here's our report.
Apple is being sued in the UK for about £3 billion. That comes to about $3.8 billion. The lawsuit states that Apple ripped off customers by that much. The alleged victims are 40 million British people. They are the UK's iCloud customers. iCloud is Apple's cloud storage feature. It allows iPhone users to back up their photos, messages, data, and everything else. With a few clicks, Apple users can have their data protected. For a price, of course. The first 5 GBs are free. But then, things can take an expensive turn. People have to start paying for extra cloud storage, depending on how much you use. In the UK, it can range from 99 pence a month all the way to $54.99 a month. That's about $70. The prices shot up last year, between 20 and 29%. It was a very steep hike, perhaps too steep for a lot of people. Now, in most cases, if things become too expensive, you can switch to a cheaper alternative, get rid of the wasteful luxury, and live more frugally. But this is Apple we're talking about. What is the alternative? How does one leave iCloud? It is impossible. Not entirely, anyway. Photos, messages, and some other things can be shifted to a different cloud storage, but there are some things that cannot be moved. Some app data is restricted. So are some settings. These things can only be stored on the iCloud, not on other cloud backups. Apple says this is for security, but in effect, this means that customers are locked in. They don't have a choice but to use iCloud, and that is what the new British lawsuit is about. It says that Apple has a monopoly on cloud storage, and it uses this monopoly to rip off customers. The lawsuit has been filed with the UK's Competition Appeal Tribunal. It hasn't been accepted yet, so there's no guarantee that this will go to the courts. Even if it does, the payout won't be phenomenal. Individual customers may get back up to £70 each, about $90. So the goal clearly isn't to undo past wrongs. Instead, it's to apply pressure. The lawsuit is a way to get Apple to stop its anti-competitive practices. The British suit is not unique. A similar one was filed in the US earlier this year. The American case hasn't concluded yet, And already we're seeing this new British one. The message is clear. People across the world are fed up with Apple's monopolistic practices. They want to be free to make real choices, to pick alternatives to the I ecosystem. People would begrudgingly accept Apple's monopoly in the past because at least they were getting innovative new products. But after years of just the iPhone 14, 15, 16, the Pro, Pro Max, Pro Ultra Super Elite Triple Plus, people have had enough. They want real innovation, not just some innovative new fees that squeeze them dry. The British iCloud lawsuit is part of a growing trend, another challenge to big tech. Let's see if it can make a difference.
Now let's turn our attention to a gas chamber. New Delhi, the world's most polluted capital city and the second most polluted city overall after Lahore in Pakistan. Delhi's air has turned to poison, and for the first time this year, it is now in the severe category. On the scale that measures air pollution, it is a reading between 400 and 500 is considered severe. Delhi's air quality stands at 428, and that's the average. Some parts of the city are far worse. Delhi has 39 air quality monitoring stations. 32 of them have recorded severe air pollution.
अगर आपकी हेल्थ सही है तो आप सर्वाइव कर सकते हो दिल्ली में. मगर आपकी हेल्थ खराब है तो दिल्ली में रहना ही मतलब impossible सा समझ लो.
This is terrible. Look at this. You cannot see even from here down 2 kilometers. You can't see anything, and people should understand. And authority also should understand that this is ridiculous.
New Delhi is surrounded by a thick layer of smog. Visibility is low. In the mornings, it drops down to zero. Flights to and from Delhi are being cancelled. The air is so toxic, it is difficult to breathe. So people's health is getting affected. 81% families have at least one member suffering from health issues due to the pollution. But Delhiites are not the only ones who are suffering. Much of northern India is in the same boat. Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh and West Bengal. Here, pollution levels are about 30 times the safe limit recommended by the World Health Organization. And the smog is so thick, it is visible even from space. Look at these images, satellite images shared by NASA. These images are so terrifying, they have gone viral. And this is not a contest that India should be winning. This is the world's 5th largest economy we're talking about, the world's most populous nation. With each passing year, India invites more investment. It plays a greater role on the world stage. Last year, we held the G20 summit. It was a gathering of the world's largest economies. This year, G20 is being held in Brazil. It begins in about 4 days from now. Do you think if India were to host that same summit today with the same arrangements, it would have been a success like the last time with this kind of pollution? How many attendees would want to breathe this toxic air? In 2015, former US President Barack Obama visited India with his wife Michelle. Do you know what global headlines talked about? How toxic the air in New Delhi is. How Michelle Obama has skipped most events. How she would rather stay in the hotel than visit the Taj Mahal. Honestly, it's not a good look. About a decade has passed since then, but air pollution continues to be deadly for India's reputation. And it costs the economy. How much? $95 billion every year. This is unbelievable. We know what causes pollution. We know what to do about it. Yet year after year, interventions are planned at the very last minute. The use of coal is banned, construction is halted, schools are shut. These measures help very little in the short run. And they definitely can't fix the problem. Every year, 2 million people die in India due to air pollution. What is the government doing to save them? This requires year-round action. It requires innovation and sustained effort. It requires investment in technology, in public transport, and in behavioral change. India's pollution crisis is a perpetual emergency. About time we treat it like one. 800 million, that's how many people are suffering from diabetes the world over. 800 million. This is according to a groundbreaking study. It says that diabetes cases have doubled over the past 3 decades, but the trends differ across nations. More than half of these cases are concentrated in just 4 countries: India, China, the US and Pakistan, in that order. So why are some nations worse hit than others? Why is diabetes on the rise, and what can be done about it? Here's a report.
Diabetes is underestimated, misunderstood, and poorly treated, so it remains one of the most common medical problems the world over. It already affects 800 million people globally, and it is on the rise. The prevalence of diabetes has doubled over the past 30 years, and this is concerning. Because contrary to what many people believe, diabetes is not a simple disease. It's not just about abnormal blood sugar control caused by a lack of insulin. Diabetes is a chronic and progressive disorder, and it has devastating consequences. It can injure critical bodily systems. It can damage the heart, kidneys, eyes, and nerves. So this one disease, be it type 1 or type 2 diabetes, can cause a number of other health issues like heart attack, stroke, kidney failure, blindness, and amputations. These are all potential risks. But diabetes is not equal for all. More than half of global diabetes cases are concentrated in just 4 countries. India leads the pack with more than a quarter of the cases, 212 million, followed by China with 148 million, then the United States with 42 million. This is the only high-income nation with so many diabetes cases. Then comes Pakistan with 36 million cases. Out of all the cases, more than 95% of people with diabetes have type 2 diabetes. Unlike type 1, type 2 diabetes can be prevented. It's mainly caused by being overweight, eating unhealthily, and not exercising enough. So, if much of diabetes is preventable, why is it on the rise? Well, there are a number of reasons. First, growing levels of obesity. Nearly 1 billion adults and 159 million children are obese the world over. This is fueling a diabetes epidemic. Secondly, a healthy lifestyle is not always affordable. Diabetes has witnessed the largest increase in low and middle income countries, where unhealthy food is the cheap and convenient choice. Thirdly, more than half of diabetes cases go untreated, and many people in lower income nations don't get the medication they need. So, what can be done about it? Improving medical access will help curb the disease. It will make both prevention and diagnosis easier. Reducing the cost of diabetes drugs will help too. In addition, countries need more action to reduce obesity, like greater availability of healthy food and increased taxes on junk food. Diabetes needs policy intervention the world over. If not, this silent killer will continue to ruin millions of lives.
Our joke of the day tonight is for the American people. Actually, scratch that. It's on the American people. You spent months insulting and abusing each other for 2 candidates. First Trump and Joe Biden, then Trump and Kamala Harris. They put on a campaign show like no other, name-calling, personal attacks, racist taunts. It was a pretty heated year of campaigning. The American people bought into all that animosity, but yesterday it fell apart. Biden and Trump got together at the White House and sparks did fly, but of a different kind. There was bromance, and I dare say chemistry between the two. Certainly wasn't on anyone's bingo card, but the pictures reminded us of those meetings in the principal's office, where 2 high school enemies patch up after fighting for years. Take a look at this.
He called them suckers and losers. Who in the hell does he think he is?
Which better, Sleepy Joe or Slow Joe? Tell me.
The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
Joe Biden is a helpless puppet of the radical left.
Donald Trump isn't just a convicted felon. Donald Trump is a one-man crime wave.
Joe Biden finally said what he and Kamala really think of our supporters. He called them garbage. No way.
joined by the defense. Move across to the West Indies. What can we expect from this?
Hello, I'm Alison Green, coming to you from Durban, South Africa. Today we have a special
Start with a report on India's shifting nuclear posture. The first time since India officially became a nuclear power.
Hello and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Aaron Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Amsterdam, protesters defy a ban to show support for Palestinians. In Peru, hundreds clash with the police on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum. And Russian rescuers save a beached whale by returning it to the sea. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 1969, Apollo 12 lifted off from Florida. This was the second manned mission to the surface of the moon, but it came chillingly close to disaster. The flight was hit by 2 lightning strikes right after its launch. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.